I am so excited about our next speaker. This is someone I call a true friend. And not only just because he's a great guy, but also the impact he's had on every one of you guys. So our next guest is the former director of the Capital Projects Fund for Treasury, Joey Winder, who's now the executive director for Shelby. And it's just so great that not only was he able to get $10 billion deployed out to across the country with 4 staff members and be able to have a wildly successful capital projects fund. So, and now he's taken over an organization that's responsible for anchor institutions, schools, libraries, all the things that are really important that really makes it a great partnership for the Fiber Broadband Association. So I'd like to invite my good friend, Joey Winder.
Gary, thank you very much for the great introduction to your wonderful chairwoman and to the entire team here at Fiber Connect. It's really an honor to be here speaking with you today. So what is Shelby? Shelby is the Schools, Health, and Libraries Broadband Coalition. We are a mission-driven national organization with a focus, and the focus is bringing high-speed internet to all anchor institutions in the United States. But what are anchor institutions? Well, anchor institutions are really the heartbeat of all of our communities. It's schools, it's libraries, it's health clinics. It's where we learn, it's where we gather, and it's where we seek care. So before I go into the really exciting topics of BEAD and the Universal Service Fund, because I am a policy person from DC, I want to share 3 quick stories about why high-speed internet is so important. I would say more important than ever at anchor institutions. I'll start first, because I have the liberty of being the speaker, I'll start with the first one is about my son. So my son is a 3rd grader at elementary school, and when they take standardized tests today, well, let's go back 35 years. I say 35 years because I was 8 years old 35 years ago. I was a 3rd grader. And so when we took standardized tests back in the day, what did we do? We bubbled in, right, those little Scantron sheets. Now, if you're nodding your head right now, you've aged yourself, okay? If you're not nodding your head, you're lucky because you're still young. Now, fast forward to today. Those tests are taken online. Now, why does that matter? Obviously, it matters in part because it was super annoying to use the number 2 pencil, but being serious, the testing is so much better today. It could be so much more interactive. Think about all the applications, the ways in which you're able to assess children if you're doing it with a computer. But further than that, when you all, or if you're my age, the teacher would simply get a score. And the score, all that mattered was you relative to another child. Now you get an individualized learning report, right? That's what the internet allows. And so that all of the educational tools that are out there today that can tailor educational content and meet a child where he or she is would simply not be possible without high-speed internet at our schools. So the second example, this is an easy one. Some of you live in rural areas. All of you go to rural areas sometimes. If you get into a car accident, or if you got into a car accident 35 years ago, and you had to have an x-ray taken, there was no radiologist there to read the x-ray. Now it could be read in seconds. Right? The only reason why that is possible is because our health clinics in rural areas and hospitals have high-speed internet that connect them to urban hospitals, and so that a specialist can see it in real time. Again, impossible without high-speed internet. And third, think about the veteran, think about the senior who goes to the library today for their help on their taxes, to apply for a job. That person probably went to that library 35 years ago as well, but all that was done on paper. You can't do it anymore on paper, right? All of these applications and services have to be done online. Again, why libraries need high-speed internet. And so that's my segue into why federal policy matters so much today. We are really at a critical moment right now in DC. And I want to talk about two specific programs. First, everybody's favorite, BEAD, because we can never talk too much about BEAD. And I also want to talk about the Universal Service Fund, which I think is overlooked in the conversation today. So first for BEAD, let me just be very clear. There is a cost of delay, okay? Not only are homes and businesses, all underserved and unserved homes and businesses going to be connected, but anchors are as well. They're going to receive gigabit service. So what is the cost of delay? There's a cost in the price of deployment, and there's a cost of missed opportunity. So I stand with my friends here at the Fiber Association, with Gary and others, and say that any delay anymore is unacceptable. We want that money to flow to states to improve the lives of individuals and communities around our country. Also want to talk about the Universal Service Fund. So what is the Universal Service Fund? Universal Service Fund was created, it was really 30 years ago, and it was the first attempt by Congress to, on a national scale, close the digital divide. It consists of 4 programs, 2 of which I want to talk specifically about today, and that's E-rate and the Rural Health Care Program. The E-rate ensures that all schools have high-speed internet, right? The goal, the overall theory behind E-rate was, and still is today, that why should a kid that lives in an affluent, well-off suburb have internet on their desks at school, and a kid who's in a rural area, in an underserved urban area, or an underprivileged urban area, not have internet? That is not fair. We should be setting a level playing field and allowing all of our children to thrive and to grow. And so what E-rate does is it pays the internet bills for schools around the country based upon a discount rate that's set by how many kids at a district are eligible for school lunch. It is a simple and elegant formula. There's 115,000 K through 12 schools in the United States. I'm talking public, private, religious, which are all eligible for E-rates. And of those 115,000 schools, 100,000 receive E-rate supports. 100,000, okay? That's over 50 million students that are impacted and improved by the E-rate program. And so the threats that the Universal Service faces today are real, and it's really profound, the impact that they could have on students around the country. There's a court case right now that the court is before the Supreme Court that's challenged the constitutionality of the Universal Service Fund, and we're expecting a decision in the next few weeks. There are those in Congress that have called for subjecting the Universal Service Fund to annual appropriations. And let me be clear, when you hear subjecting USF to annual appropriations, that is an effort to starve and kill the program. There is nothing predictable, sustainable, or long-term about congressional appropriations. All you have to do is watch the news. And finally, there are those at the commission that have talked about slashing the USF, doging the USF. My message to you is that is completely the wrong way to think about it. You know, I got here yesterday morning and I sat through a bunch of panels. All I keep hearing about is AI, quantum, the 21st century economy, competing with our other global rivals. Do you think that means we should have slower speeds at schools and libraries? Do you think that means we should have less bandwidth at rural health clinics? That's completely the wrong direction for us to be moving in. We need fiber at every anchor institution in the United States. We need fast service. We need to be able to compete and invest in our communities and in our children. That's what we should be doing right now. And so that's why at Shelby, we're advocating for sustainable, predictable, long-term funding to ensure that these funds are solvent and that they prop up our communities. And they really do continue to serve as places where we learn, we grow, we gather, and we seek care. So I'm going to wrap up here in a second, and we're going to do a little chat. But I just want to bring it back to the beginning. And I really, for those of us who were here last night for the movie, you know, the movie in many ways starts in anchor institutions, right? That's the first place so many of us experienced the internet, certainly for myself, right? It was in a computer lab in a school, or it was in a library where you could go on this thing that was created, the World Wide Web, and access information. Well, my message to you is those institutions are as important as ever, as places where people learn digital skills, where they go online, and where they improve their lives, right? We are bringing high-speed internet to every home and business. That's great. That is terrific. And we should do that. And I'm excited to talk about some of my work at Capital Projects in a second about how we worked to achieve that. But that's not a substitute for schools and libraries and health clinics. We still go to those places. I'm sure many of you go to those places on a weekly basis, or you have children that go to school 5 days a week. We need to continue to invest in them because there are people that either don't know how to connect, that cannot afford connect, and that benefit from going to anchor institutions to learn, to apply for jobs, and to seek health care. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I really want to close with this, is really to thank all of you. You know, this ecosystem, this telecom broadband ecosystem is huge. It's huge, right? This is just, I mean, this is a very, very large room, and this is still just one facet of it. And so I'm really wanted to thank you because all of you are contributing to this larger network, right? This larger goal of improving lives and bringing high-speed internet to our communities around the country. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation right now. So I think Jessica's about to come out. Jessica, anybody?
Please welcome to the stage Jessica Cope,
There she is.
FDA Conference Committee Vice Chair, to join Joseph.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. You're relatively new to Shelby.
Yes, I am.
In fact, this is your first job outside of federal government in about 16 years. Tell us about that change.
It's different. It is different. You know, what's exciting to me about coming to Shelby is these are issues I worked on for years. You know, before I was at Capital Projects, which we'll talk about in a minute, I worked on the Hill for 13 years, most of it for Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. Ed Markey was the author of the 1996 Telecom Act, which created the E-rates. And so, you know, in many ways, you know, going to Shelby is like coming home for me. And I get to work on and advocate for the issues that I've cared about for so long.
Right. And one of those issues, right, that we talk a lot about in this industry, very specific to some of our operators, is USF. And you mentioned that in your comments. Can you talk a little bit more about why USF matters so much to these operators?
Absolutely. Again, USF is a nearly $10 billion a year program. And just speaking specifically for E-rate and for rural health care, I mean, that's $4 billion of money that's flowing into the system, but it's connecting schools, libraries, and health facilities around the country, right? You can't just turn that switch off. You can't recoup that revenue from somewhere else. I mean, think about how hard and how difficult school and library and health clinic budgets are. So tight, so difficult. You know, without this money, they could shut off the internet.
Right.
And we'll think about the disadvantage that would put children around the country.
Right.
I mean, we should be investing more in our modern infrastructure, not less right now.
Right. And this is especially true in rural America, where maybe healthcare and overall access could already be limited, right? So removing another funding mechanism would have a huge impact.
Huge, right? Last night in the movie, it talked about people driving hours and hours to see a doctor. Well, in a lot of instances now in 2025, you don't have to do that, right? And the reason why is internet, is fiber connections. You could telehealth in with a doctor. They could see images. They can help with procedures. That would not be possible.
Right.
So when people say, is this life or death? I mean, it is life or death.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it impacts every generation, right? Your last few years in federal service were spent at the Treasury, and one specifically directing the Capital Projects Fund. Most agree that this program was very successful. Let's talk about your success there and getting that money out the door and really impacting communities that have been unserved and underserved.
The light bulb moment for me at Capital Projects was the awareness that I wasn't running one program. I was loosely overseeing 50, right? And acknowledging that it was states that were in the driver's seats, right? It takes a lot for someone in Washington to say this, but I'll say it. Washington does not know best when it comes to deploying billions of dollars. That's how Congress set it up, capital projects, and that's the expectation or hope with BEAD, right? Put states in the driver's seat. I mean, there are so many state broadband leaders here. I got to visit with many of them yesterday. They know their communities much better than I do, right? In many ways, it's, and this is obviously the message for BEAD as well. It's like, get out of the way. Let them proceed, and I promise, I know we have proof of concept now with capital projects. The results in aggregate will be tremendously successful.
And because of your involvement with capital project funds, talk a little bit about how much of the dollars that were deployed specifically for fiber.
Yeah, so we had first of all, we had a fiber preference, and our speed requirements are 100 symmetrical, which is even higher than BEAD. And between those two factors and giving discretion to states, lo and behold, what do you think most states chose? Fiber, right?
Yeah.
Over 90% of our dollars were deployed, or are being deployed right now, for fiber connections. Fiber is the gold standard. When people said, oh, you put your thumb on the scale in favor of fiber, I said, got me, right? It's true, we did. And the result will be so much more positive over the long run, because the idea is not to make investments for years, it's for decades. I just want to say this. We're not going to get a do-over, right? Between capital projects, BEAD, we're not going to get another infusion of $50, $60 billion. Like, this is a one-shot deal. We got one chance to do this right. And the idea was to create that foundation, to set that model with our $10 billion in capital projects about here are the transformative investments that are possible that we can make around the country with these dollars.
Right. And as we think about anchor institutions, right, and their need for fiber, because of the number of applications, right, that lay on top of that connection, right, it's not always just as simple as maybe a video conference for, with a healthcare professional, right? There are many more applications. And so when you think about, how important anchor institutions are, to these communities and the need for fiber, what are kind of some of your thoughts about just why fiber is such a demand driver there?
Right. I mean, think about the data transfers that are required for health clinics, right? And not only the amount, the volume, the need for no latency, right? None. Right? Think about my son Sam, who's at school right now. I mean, think of how many applications are running in that little elementary school, in that little building with 300 kids right now. So many different things, right? We don't need the buffering sign to come back. We shouldn't be cutting off these connections.
Right.
And
we should be funding fiber to all these institutions to the extent to which it is possible. That's the gold standard.
Right.
So let's do that.
Right. It's about the experience.
Absolutely.
And just to kind of wrap up our conversation, you know, one topic that's getting a lot of attention also is cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Right. We all know that it's a huge concern. What's your perspective about cybersecurity and your role at Shelby?
Sure. So when I talk to CTOs at school districts, when I ask them, what's your #1 issue? Cyber. Cyber. How many attacks do you get? How many attacks do you get on a month? And their response is, well, do you want me to tell you how many attacks I got today? Right? I think it's another example of why we should be providing more funding, right? The FCC did a pilot program put in place on cybersecurity. Clearly the demand is overwhelmingly there, right? The need for more dollars for cybersecurity. And so it's something that we're very focused on, is very necessary, and it's just another reason why we should be increasing funding for anchor institutions.
Right. Well, thank you for your remarks today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work that you're doing for our industry and for the advocacy and the need for fiber and funding for that fiber. So thank you so much.
Thank you.